Good evening and welcome to the evening version of the Senate Committee on Finance and Assembly Committee on Ways and Means Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education. And Committee Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senators Buck, Cannizzaro, Dondero Loop, Neal, Wynn, Stone, Taylor, Titus, Assembly members Anderson, Backus, Brown May, Dickman, Hafen, Hibbets, Howdegi, Koenig, Muska, O'Neill, Torres Fawcett, Watts, Yeager, and Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Assembly Member Mosca absent excused? I'll remind members and those of you joining us in the audience, and thank you for your patience in being here late in the evening. I think this is going to be just the way the life rolls until now, until sign and die. So let's get used to it. I'll remind you all to turn off your electronic devices or mute them. We will have public comment at the end of the meeting. To call in for public comment, that number is 888-475-4499. The meeting ID is 882-495-82105. And we are here for reports from subcommittees on budget closings. We will have the first with the Treasurer's Office, with the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank bonds and bond interest redemption, and then the Department of Administration's Capital Improvement Program. And I will invite our staff to the table, and as soon as everyone gets their packet, we can get started. And thank you, and good evening. All right, I think everyone got the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank General Obligation Bonds packet, so we can get started.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Adam Dross with LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. Today I'll be presenting the closing report for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank General Obligation Bonds. The Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education, CIP, completed its review of the recommended general obligation bonds for the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank, or the bank, for the 2025-27 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee result in no general obligation bond issuance for the bank over the 2025-27 biennium. The following provides the subcommittee's specific recommendations. For the Community Infrastructure Grant Program, the governor recommended $75 million in general obligation bonds for this program, which would provide grants or forgivable loans to qualified borrowers to support rural housing projects or qualified infrastructure projects. The subcommittee did not recommend the issuance of general obligation bonds of $75 million for the bank to provide forgivable loans through this program, but indicated that future approval of the issuance of bonds for the Community Infrastructure Grant Program may be considered at a later date in conjunction with the governor's proposed Economic Development Policy Reform Act, or Senate Bill 461. For the bond funding for eligible bank projects, the governor recommended $75 million in general obligation bonds for the bank to provide loans and other financial assistance to qualified borrowers for eligible projects for bank funding, as defined in NRS 226715. The subcommittee did not recommend the issuance of general obligation bonds of $75 million for the bank to provide funding for eligible projects as defined in NRS 226715. And Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Members, are there any questions? Not seeing any, I'll accept a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next closing, it will be the Department of Administration's Capital Improvement Program. Members are getting their documents now. Once we have everything handed out, you can get started.
I think that
I think everyone got their packets. We can get started.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Joint Full Committee. My name is Julie Waller, and I'm with the Fiscal Analysis Division. I'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee closing report for the Office of the Treasurer Bond Interest and Redemption Account, as well as a 2025 Capital Improvement Program. The Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP has completed its review of the Governor's recommendations for the 25-27 biennium for the State Treasurer's Bond Interest and Redemption Budget Account and the 2025 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, and has made the following recommendations. For the Bond Interest and Redemption Budget Account 1082, the subcommittee recommended approval of this budget account as recommended by the Governor with technical adjustments to align Property Tax Revenue Authority with projected collections. The subcommittee further recommended that fiscal staff include language in the 2025 CIP bill consistent with prior biennia, allowing for work program revisions to be requested through and approved by the Governor's Finance Office for this budget account without requiring approval by the Interim Finance Committee for budgetary revisions that are necessary for the purpose of bond repayment costs. Moving on to the top of page 2, in regard to the 2025 Capital Improvement Program, inclusive of considerations of the budget amendments and a project scope and funding modification submitted by the Governor's Finance Office, the subcommittee recommended funding 71 projects for a total cost of $1.154 billion in the revised 2025 CIP as follows: $833.2 million in funding for 20 construction projects, $20.6 million in funding for 9 planning projects, $241.9 million in funding for 28 maintenance projects, and $57.9 million in funding for 14 statewide projects. As detailed in Attachment A, the subcommittee's closing recommendations resulted in the following funding recommendations to support the $1.154 billion total cost of the 71 projects. $760.7 million in general obligation bonds, inclusive of $1.7 million in reallocated bond proceeds, $174.7 million in other funding sources, including $167.4 million in federal funds, $201.7 million in general fund appropriations, inclusive of $11.8 million in reallocated general fund appropriations, $9.9 million in highway fund appropriations, and $6.7 million in state general obligation bonds with debt service to be repaid by the highway fund appropriations. The following describes the notable construction projects recommended for approval by the subcommittee. As recommended by the Governor, the subcommittee recommended approving CIP Project 25C01 to construct a 327,000 square foot, 300-bed forensic psychiatric facility in Las Vegas to serve individuals awaiting adjudication and needed treatment to competency, as well as support long-term commitments funded with $381 million in state general obligation bonds. In conjunction with CIP Project 25C01, the subcommittee recommended approval of CIP Project 25C02, Desert Regional Center Facilities, Las Vegas, as recommended by the Governor to design and construct replacement buildings for 3 buildings at the Desert Regional Center in Las Vegas. This project would replace aging buildings that have reached the end of their useful life and provides land necessary to support the construction of the new 300-bed forensic facility recommended in CIP Project 25C01. The total project cost of $38 million is recommended to be funded with state general obligation bonds. In concurrence with the Governor's proposal, the subcommittee recommended approval of CIP Project 25C03 for the construction of a 156,700 square foot, 128-bed single occupancy skilled nursing facility for veterans in North Las Vegas, and funding total project costs of $223.2 million with $78.1 million in state general obligation bonds and $145.1 million in federal funds. The subcommittee also recommended approval of CIP Project 25C26 for the purchase and improvements of 5 office buildings on or near the McCarran Complex in Las Vegas for state use, and funding total purchase costs and improvement building purchase and improvement costs of $71.2 million with state general obligation bonds. Subcommittee also recommended the addition of $7.5 million in general fund appropriations, as recommended by the Governor through a budget amendment to purchase 3 yet-to-be-constructed intermediate care facility buildings to permanently relocate youth needing specialized care from the Department of Health and Human Services West Charleston Boulevard campus. However, rather than increasing CIP Project 25C26 by the $7.5 million, the subcommittee recommended approving the additional funds and building purchases for this purpose as a separate and distinct CIP project. The subcommittee further recommended approval of CIP Project 25C27 for the purchase of a 79,248 square foot office building for state use in Reno. Based on the most recent appraisal of the building, the subcommittee recommending approving $20.2 million for the building purchase, resulting in a reduction of $4 million compared to the $24.2 million recommended by the Governor. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of the following CIP projects recommended by the Governor. Project 25C12, Youth Mental Health Intake Building, Summit View Youth Center in Las Vegas, recommended to be funded with $5.5 million in state general obligation bonds, as the Joint Subcommittee on Health and Human Services did not recommend approval of funding for the personnel and operating costs for the new program at the recommended intake building. And 25S10, Statewide Building Move Program, recommended to be funded with $1.8 million in general fund appropriations. The subcommittee concurred with the Governor's recommendation for 9 planning projects. The larger planning projects recommended for approval by the subcommittee include, but are not limited to, 25P01, Advanced Planning, Culinary Bakery and Laundry Building, Northern Nevada Correctional Center, Department of Corrections, funded with $2.6 million in general fund appropriations. Project 25P04, Advanced Planning, Eagle Valley Dam Rehabilitation, Spring Valley State Park, Department of Wildlife, funded with $2.8 million in general fund appropriations. And Project 25P08, Advanced Planning, State Office Buildings, Capitol Complex, Department of Administration, funded with $6.2 million in general fund appropriations. As requested by the Governor's Finance Office, the subcommittee recommended approving the cancellation of CIP Project 23C33, Southern Nevada Small Arms Range, Nevada Army National Guard, in accordance with statute. The 82nd 2023 legislature approved this project for a total cost of $17 million. However, a subsequent update to Army regulations disallowed the site selected for the small arms range. As such, the Office of the Military is working to secure federal funds to develop an arms range at the Hawthorne Army Depot in Northern Nevada. The subcommittee also recommended that fiscal staff include back language in the CIP legislation that would approve 2-year project extensions requested by the State Public Works Division for the 20 projects as identified in Attachment C. The subcommittee further directed fiscal staff to review individual project funding sources with possible consideration of adjusting funding for certain projects with an estimated useful life of greater than 20 years from general fund appropriations to general obligation bonds. This direction was based on unallocated bonding affordability identified by fiscal staff with the intent to identify general fund savings that could be realized through funding adjustments, and for fiscal staff to present any such changes to the joint full committees at closing. Based upon this review and the total bond affordability identified as available for allocation in the 25-27 biennium in the Treasurer's Debt Capacity and Affordability Report issued on January 14, it was determined that the unallocated bond affordability fiscal staff initially presented to this subcommittee was calculated in error. A subsequent conversation with the Treasurer's Office and Governor's Finance Office indicated that there is additional affordability beyond the total bond affordability of $994.8 million allocated in the executive budget for the 2025-27 biennium. The Treasurer's affordability analysis also projects future general obligation bond affordability of $2.1 billion over the 3 subsequent biennia. Any authorization of general obligation bond issuances for the 25-27 biennium beyond the bond affordability allocation identified in the Treasurer's January report could potentially reduce general obligation bond affordability in future years and would be dependent upon the economic conditions at that time. Given this information and the direction from the subcommittee, fiscal staff has reviewed individual project funding recommendations and is providing for the committee's consideration an option to utilize additional bond affordability of $75 million to adjust funding for certain projects with an estimated useful life of 20 years or more from general fund appropriations to general obligation bonds as reflected on the table provided in Attachment F. And finally, the subcommittee recommended authority for fiscal staff to make any technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much for the report. I know we were handed a few documents, and one is this chart, the Capital Improvement Program, with all of the different CIP projects listed on it. Members, I'd like to direct, and I'd like to ask some questions, and I think we have Mr. Robb on the phone if there's no one here in the room that can answer it. But my first question's on C05, which is the Hobart Dam. There's been a lot of conversation about this one. When we started the session out, we heard time and time again how bad this dam was in and the potential of it breaking and its impact to the communities below it. We also lost federal grant money that was allocated for that facility. So if you look on that line, during the subcommittee we had added the $10 million, but this sheet, if I am understanding it, was the Governor's Office recommendation of items that could be, programs that could be cut. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. The Governor's Finance Office provided a list of projects that they identified that could be deferred for future CIP recommendations, and at this time that they, that was the committee's desire to postpone these projects that have been identified.
Thank you so much for that. So that was one of the items that was listed that could be deferred into a later time. I am not comfortable with that. I'd love to have a discussion on that. And then moving further down to C27, the state office building purchase, the one here in Reno. If you go over to the work session, there was $4 million that was removed, but during your presentation, you mentioned something about the appraisal. With that appraisal, and maybe Mr. Robb can, if he's on the phone, can go into it. Should we remove the entire $4 million, or should we perhaps cover that appraisal cost. And does anyone know how much that is? And should we move part of that back? If they could answer that question, that would be great. And do we have, oh, I see Mr. Robb. There you are. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so let's do those first two, and then I have one or two more.
Okay, the Hobart Reconstruct. We have a current CIP going on at Marlette.
Could you just state your name for the record? I'm sorry, you have to do it even from your
Jack.
car.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me do it from Tonopah, Nevada. I really do. Jack Robb, for the record, Chief Innovation Officer, Governor Lombardo's office. When it comes to the Hobart rebuild, yes, we recognize it needs to go. Yes, it is one of our priorities. But in knowing that there's three major portions to the water system up there, one being Marlette, one being the East Slope system, and one being Hobart, to be working on all three legs of that system at one time could be overwhelming, not only to the area, but to our ability to continue serving water that Story County is 100% reliant on, and Carson City relies on that water source also. So Hobart does need to be rebuilt. It's one of our priorities, but we have the other two projects in process now. So we have our hands full with the two. So that's why we would like to defer this one for the next few years.
Thank you for that. So would you need this project, the bonding authority for this project, so when those other two are completed, you can move right into this one? Or don't think it'll be done within this biennium and you would bring it back next legislative session?
Jack Robb, for the record, the construction schedule on those two, it's weather dependent, and so they can't get in to even start construction until June. They have to be out in October. They don't get a full construction season because of the snow load in the area. So it's a multi-year project on both of them. So we would not be back or be able to complete those projects in this biennium. So we would like to hold off and ask for Hobart in an upcoming biennium.
Okay, so my last question, I don't know if any other members have any on that project. Can you honestly tell us, because of all the conversation that we had earlier in the session was the condition of this dam, do you safely believe that this dam is not going to break and have any negative impact to the families and the communities downstream from it?
Jack Robb, for the record, appreciate that question. It is an aging dam. It does have some deficiencies, doesn't meet modern standards, but in all the dams we have across the state, this one's in better shape than some of the ones that we do have. I am comfortable waiting for the next 2 years to get this dam constructed or come back to get funding to construct it.
Okay, thank you. Members, does anyone else have questions for Mr. Robb on this dam? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to reconstruct my little damage here. So, Mr. Robb, just to be clear, if the dam looked like it was at risk of failing, you could divert water from it so that you don't have to keep it full?
Jack Robb, for the record, just as we've done with Cave Lake and others, we have taken measures to draw those down to get them into a safety zone until we can do the reconstruction.
Great. I just
Cave Lake, we had in the safety zone for multiple years before the construction started.
Right. I just wanted to make that clear that there was that, you know, you're not going to leave this maximum full, and then if there was a big spring or a big winter, that you can control how much is in that lake for that very purpose, correct?
Jack Robb, for the record, like I stated with Cave Lake, we put in emergency siphons. We took other mitigating measures to ensure the safety of the citizens below those dams. So we do have that ability if required.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Dondero-Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Robb, for the information. Here's my concern. When we first discussed this, we talked a lot about how poorly what poor conditions the dams were in, and that's plural. And so with that being said, I know that these dams were, and I'm going to test your Nevada history here, because I know the answer. I know the dams were first constructed, I believe, in the 1800s, 1870 something, and then they were reconstructed or worked on in the 50s. And so is it really, it just feels really uncomfortable to me after all the discussion we've had that we're putting these this work off. I understand what you're saying about the timeline of the work, but like, for example, this session, since we've been here, we have really not had a lot of snow. And so I would think that maybe we could escalate that working time a little bit quicker. Plus, if we wait 2 years and nothing happens, that's the other thing, we've got to keep our fingers crossed. I mean, there's no guarantee what's going to happen next session with our economy. So I'm a little worried about putting this off. So can you give me some information on that? I don't know if there was an actual yes or no question in there, but if you can give me some information.
Yes, Jack Robb for the record. As I stated, we have a major project going at Marlette, and that dam was older and in worse condition, and that dam is currently set to construct this summer. The drawdown has already started, and that is going to take a potential water supply away from Story County and Carson City. So that's limiting our capacity to deliver water to Story and Carson City. At the same time, I don't know if you remember last fall, we had a gas line hit during one of the construction activities just above Franktown, above Washoe Lake there. And that gas line hit was in conjunction with our East Slope water system rebuild that is currently ongoing also. There's 3 sources of water that we can rely on to deliver water to Story and Carson City, and 2 of them are being worked on right now. We think for the stability of the system and for the timing of everything, we are working on the dam in the worst condition. That's Marlette. That is currently ongoing. This dam, we have higher confidence in than we did the Marlette Dam. So that's why we've chosen the order that we were working on. So yes, it does need to be reconstructed. Yes, it is something we need to get on in short order, but 2 years is not going to make that big a difference.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So in all honesty, these dams were built years apart. I mean, we're not talking they were built decades apart. We're talking years. The Hobart Dam was built, Marlette was built in 1873, Hobart was built in 1877, and I think Eagle Valley was built after that, of course. But, and then some of the renovations took place in the 50s, several years apart. So in all fairness, I'm looking at this, that these are equals. I mean, there's not enough time in between, and we've had issues with both dams. Am I correct, both Hobart and Marlette?
Jack Robb for the record. The dam that you are referring to at Hobart that was built in the 1870s actually failed, and that's the only loss of life we've ever had in Nevada with the failure of a dam. So a good portion of that was reconstructed after that, probably in the 20s and 30s in that time frame. So it is not the same age as Marlette, and it does not hold near the capacity that Marlette does. Marlette is multiple times greater in capacity and critical nature of the dam.
Well, I'm still going to go on the record of saying I am very concerned about us putting this off and not putting it on our docket, if you will, now. and waiting 2 years and just doing a hope and prayer that we have the money and nothing happens. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hadeke?
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to express the same concerns as all of my colleagues. I know during the hearing I asked questions about the Hobart Dam too, and I believe the information we were given was that there was serious concerns about the stress and stability of the dam and that it was an urgent matter. And so the question I have is, if I remember correctly from that hearing, don't we have a CMAR for both the Martlet Dam and Hobart Dam? So wouldn't one project be able to be completed and then immediately roll into the next project? So once we're done with Martlet Dam, we can roll right into Hobart Dam?
Jack Raw for the record. Yes, the dam construction is one phase of this aspect. The other is the amount of time it's going to take to recharge the Martlet system because of how high it's placed on the mountain. With even if we get good snow load, there's not a lot of bowl above it or water collection capacity. So it's going to be multi-years to get that back to capacity. So in looking at that, that's why we have said we could do this at a different time. I'm listening to the flavor of this committee and the committees, and if they want us to do it, we are capable to do them. There's no doubt, but if we can go either way, but we can do it in a couple of years, and we would be comfortable doing that.
Mr. Robb, do we have a CMAR in place for both projects?
Jack Raw for the record. I know we have a CMAR on Martlet. I would ask if Brian Walker or Will Lewis could come to the podium. One's in Carson and one's in Las Vegas.
Administrator Will Lewis for the record. So I know we do have a CMAR in place for the Martlet Lake water system. I'll defer to Brian if we have a second one.
Good evening, Brian Walker for the record. Yes, we do have a CMAR in place for both projects. It's the same CMAR for both, Granite Construction Company.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my last question is, and so if the bonding was approved, then you feel comfortable that you can get both dams repaired within the next biennium?
Brian Walker for the record. It's fun being in two rooms. I was waiting to see if my boss was going to answer first. But correct. So if it was funded, the Martlet project, I'll just talk about the schedules for these. We are weeks away from really substantially starting construction on that project. The construction would be primarily this summer with the follow-up next season. Like previously mentioned, the seasons are short up there at Martlet Lake. The Hobart project, if it receives funding, the intent would be to start construction and do most of the construction on that project summer of 2026.
Summer of 26, and when would you expect it to be completed by? Thank you, Chair, for the follow-up.
Brian Walker for the record. The schedule I have from the project team on that shows summer 2026. I'm expecting, honestly, it would bleed into the early summer 2027 to be fully complete.
And then just my last question. What would you say the risk level of Hobart Dam is?
Brian Walker for the record. That is a good question for this conversation. I think we wouldn't have brought the project, to this committee, to this point in the session if we didn't feel serious about it being a project that does need to happen. I do want to kind of soften that a little bit. It's not something that is so dire that it's an emergency situation for us. I know Cave Lake Dam, that had an emergency siphon put in place. They brought the water level down. They were down there very concerned about that structure. And that, I think stayed in that condition for a handful of years until funding could, bring that project to completion. At the Hobart Reservoir, there's none of those, measures have been put into place yet. So it's not what I would call like an emergency type situation where it's very, very dire today, like Cave Lake.
But we don't want to wait until it's in that condition before we do something, correct?
Oh. Brian Walker for the record. I agree. We don't want to wait until it's dire. You do not want to have a dam fail.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair, and hopefully staff can help me because I know there's a lot of back and forth of when we were able to actually do this project, and I understand. Sounds like there's only very limited number of contractors that can do this specified work, and so my question is, if we go ahead and we grant the bonding authority for this project, does the bond have to be taken out like with the big lump sum of all of these, or can it be postponed until such time that this project and the contractors can be ready to start construction?
Madam Chair, Julie Waller for the record. Yes, the bonds are issued based on the work plan from the State Public Works Division, and so they're not issued all up front. They're dependent on what projects would be planned to be started in the time frame that the bond proceeds would be needed. So the bond issuances are timed accordingly. It would not be that this CIP program that is approved by the legislature would have all the bonds issued up front. They are issued over the 4-year period depending on the work plan of the State Public Works Division and the need for funding.
And then follow up. Thank you so much for that. And then my next question is in the event that we do approve the bond authorization for this and the project's not able to be started or constructed over the biennium, would the bonding authority then roll over into the next biennium, or would they have to come back to the next legislative body for approval or reallocation of those funds?
Thank you for the question. Julie Waller for the record. Through you, Madam Chair, to Assemblymember.
You can go directly to the member.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. So if there were delays, the State Public Works Division could request a project extension. That typically is granted in previous sessions for a 2-year period. And if it was determined that it could not be completed at all, then that bonding authority would roll forward to future biennia.
Thank you. Any other questions on the Hobart Dam? Okay, then let's move on to the second item I had a question on, and that's C27. That's the state office building purchase in Reno. Mr. Robb, could you give us a little bit more information? Yes. Thank you.
Jack Robb for the record. As I stated in prior hearings, I backed into a price on this property, and so did a broker that we're working with back into a price. I can tell you $20 million was a little bit short of what I thought that price would be, and we have conveyed the $20 million appraisal to the current owner, and the current owner does not like that $20 million appraisal. He is going out to get his own appraisal. And should they come in different, I'm worried about our ability to close this deal. If we were to build this building, it's 80,000 square feet. It would cost us about $80 million. It's a less than 20-year-old building in fantastic shape. We do have 305 people staffed in that building at this current time, and we would like to take it out of a rent status and own this into the future. And I do not want to come up a little bit shy on being able to close the deal. So I have requested that we get 2 of the $4 million to give us some negotiation room.
Members, any questions? And currently, we're in a 5-year rental agreement on this building, is that correct?
Yes, and it's contingent upon us occupying the building. We did write into that lease that if we did not come to an agreement on purchase, that if we opted to, we could move out. And I think that's what devalued some of that appraisal, is our ability to vacate that property. Brought that appraisal down because they look at, for appraisal purposes, they forecast rental income on those properties, and that's a deciding factor. And with our ability to move out, that brought that appraisal down.
And with your experience in this area, do you feel the additional $2 million will be the amount needed for this newly updated appraisal?
Without a doubt, because the owner has countered at that additional $2 million. I really hate putting stuff like this on the record as we are currently, because that really damages my ability to negotiate much, because it's going to be out there.
That it is, and I'm sure the owner is listening. So, members, any other questions? Assemblymember Haven.
Thank you, Chair. I probably shouldn't ask this question, but if we only gave them $1 million, would that be a little bit more helpful?
Check her off for the record. I'm still going to negotiate. I don't want to spend the full $2 million. But to be honest with you, when I backed into the price, and when the broker backed into the price, we both backed into it within $250,000 of each other at $22 million. And I do believe it is worth that.
And my last question for you, is this a mutually agreed upon appraisal company that you're using, or the owner of the building's best friend?
Jack Robb, for the record, the first appraisal was one we contracted for. Unlike Thomas and Mack, they pay for the appraisals. On this one, we funded that appraisal. Where I'm going to have negotiation room is our appraisal and their appraisal, which is going to say, okay, we recognize there's a difference. If the second appraisal comes in at $20 million, we can only pay appraised value. If the second one comes in at $22 million, I'm going to negotiate to split the difference between his appraisal and my appraisal.
And if the second appraisal comes in at $18 million, if the owner is listening, that's all we're paying. So, just so you know, it's out there. Any other questions on that one before I move on to the next that I have a question on? And other members may have questions on other items that are on the list. Okay, not seeing any. Then can we move to the second page, M23? It's the Wildlife Key Pittman, the residential water intrusion repairs. Anything with water and repairs scares me. I've had floods in my home. Could we have a little discussion on that? I see that that is on the list of one of the projects to be deferred. And it's not a very large dollar amount, which is kind of crazy that I say that. I never thought, you know, 200,000 would be something. I say it's not a large dollar amount. But could you give us a little bit more information about the situation?
Jack Robb, for the record. The rest of them on the list, the reason they came to be on that list is we, as a group, looked at total impact, the number of employees or citizens impacted by the project, whether they were need-to-haves right now, if we could defer them a couple years, they all need to occur, and that's why they made it as far as they have. We put this list together as items that if you saw a need to cut, We wanted to give you an idea of some of the ones that we could do without today, but we would be back the next legislative session to get them completed. We're not saying they need to be cut. We're saying if cuts are required, please look at these first.
Okay, that's great, and I understand that. My question is, what is the damage, if any, of this project with the water, at the residential water intrusion and the repairs that are needed? So I get a better idea of what this almost $300,000 would be utilized for. And if we don't do it now, with the damage that's there now, we come back in 2 years, how much more damage and how much more money would be needed for the repairs in 2 years?
Jack, off the record, I'll defer to Will Lewis and Brian Walker. They know this project better than I do.
Administrator Will Lewis, I'd like Brian to come up and phone a friend, but my understanding of the structure is that it is stable. The water intrusion is not an ongoing issue, but I'd like Brian to talk a little bit as far as some of the measures we've taken to stabilize the structure, please.
Yeah, Brian Walker for the record. Thank you for that question. It's a pulling a question out of the middle of this, and so it is a small project. It's not a massive thing. Like Administrator Lewis said, they're doing what they can to keep the structure stable. I think with that project, it's honestly just like a ranger's residence basically there at the WMA, and so it's something that is stable that could wait 2 years. I think a lot of kind of the concerns or issues with water intrusion into a residence like that actually start to, look like mold or other things of that nature, which is why it was recommended to be complete. Can it wait? I think it could wait if needed. I think, structurally it's not going to be a problem. I remember doing mold tests in that basement about 5 or 6 years ago. I was down there doing it. Back then it was stable and there wasn't a mold issue at that time. But any time with water, that is a concern.
Thank you so much for that. And do we have an employee ranger currently living there, residing there?
Jack Crawl for the record, yes, we do.
Okay, so we do have a state employee that's residing there that might possibly have mold that would only be worse in 2 more years, which could be a health concern for that employee, correct?
If mold occurs, yes.
I'm going to go to Senator Dondero Loop first.
I just have a quick question because it seems to me that we've had several wildlife items cut. Is there a reason that those items are the wildlife items are being cut?
Jack Robb for the record. We are not saying they should be cut. If there's anything to be cut, these are items we would like you to look at. Take, for example, the Lux Lane regrading and drainage improvement. Yes, that's something that needs to occur. We have high water events out there maybe every 10 to 15 years. So that's something that probably will not see an impact. The Lux Lane bridge replacement, like I said before, we're looking at total impact, number of employees impacted, numbers of general public impacted, or is it something that can wait a couple of years? That bridge does need to be replaced, but it is not the sole access point. You can come in off of Miller Lane. So if we did have to close that bridge, it would not shut that area down. You would just have to access it from another spot.
So I understand that, but we've got, not that they're all wildlife, but we have dams and we have water in a ranger's home where we're asking somebody to live and work that might be dangerous to their health. We're asking for Lux Lane bridge replacements. We're asking for it just seems like a lot of this are things that we should have been doing all along, and now when we go to do them, they're being cut. So I don't know if there's a question in there, Madam Chair, but I'll let you go on to someone else.
Members, any other questions before I move on to the next item that I have an issue with? I am not comfortable with when you say that the impact to employees, the impact to community members. It may not be a large number of employees, but that one employee's health matters. And right now, the cost is $294,184, and that would be general funds. And I think our employees' life is worth that amount to take care of that now, so we don't have to pay even more money later for additional repairs and/or medical bills for the health of that employee. So I would recommend not deferring that project. The last project that I would like to discuss a little further is M02. It's at the top of page 2. It's the facility maintenance for the Department of Health and Human Services. And in that, there was $10 million, and this is a general fund project, which we're trying to save as much general funds. But what would be the effect to this project by cutting the $10 million from it, from the total of the, is the total 21 and 10 was cut, or was it supposed to be 31 with the 10 cut? Sorry, it's at the very top of page 2, M02.
Brian Walker for the record. I thought I'll just jump in and answer that question. The total for that project, I don't know why it's wrong in that table, but the total for that project is $22,515,211. And I know that's correct on the other spreadsheet you have in front of you and in the CIP book.
Madam Chair, Julie Waller for the record. The amount reflected on the document you're looking at, reflecting 21,944,899, reflects the subcommittee's recommendation to remove the $570,312 for the emergent projects.
Perfect, thank you. And then with the deferral of cutting the $10 million, what would that do with that project? How would that impact that project would be a better question.
Jack Robb for the record. We're looking at North Nevada Mental Health Campus, Southern Nevada Mental Health Campus. We're looking at all the infrastructure the state owns to determine if spending money on them is the proper thing to do. They need money spent if we determine to stay, but we are looking at possible other ways to house individuals, house employees, and in Northern Nevada, we're actually looking at working with some nonprofits to take a portion of that property over. So while we're in the midst of all these changes and possible better ways to look at long-term facilities, we think it's prudent to pull some of this funding back and retool, work with Richard Whitley and his staff to ensure we've got a better long-term plan that may include buildings outside the ones that we're trying to rehab and do other work on.
I got to admit to you, Mr. Robb, when you say look at buildings outside, this makes me think you're going to try to find more buildings to buy. We ain't got no money, so don't do that. Can you tell us, by cutting that $10 million, what would you be removing from that project? You had a big vision plan for what this project was going to be. What would you be cutting back? How is that going to impact DHHS and what their plans were and their service to the community?
Jack Raw for the record. With the available funding left, we will prioritize the items that need to get taken care of and make sure that those items are taken care of with long-term planning in consideration. And Brian's probably got a list of items. Brian Walker at the table can probably go over some of those items we need to look at. But there was paving projects, electrical upgrades, and other things in some of these buildings, and we're looking to maybe not even house employees in some of these buildings because they're getting so old and costly to maintain.
So it looks like they've put it on you again. Do you have an answer to the question that I asked because Mr. Robb did not answer it?
Yeah, Brian Walker for the record. I have, checked off on this list here. There's, and I guess I should slow down. 25 MO2 is inside of our project, our office, we'll call it a super project. It's a collection of sub-projects, right? And so I have, basically 8 sub-projects that we have checked off here that I guess would approximate $10 million. Most of these are at the NAMS, or really the NAMS campus in Sparks in northern Nevada. And I could walk through those projects. So
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Brian Walker again for the record. The projects that we're talking about would be Sub-Project 2, which replaces Building 25 hot and chilled water piping at the NAMS campus. Sub-Project 5, which is the building first floor HVAC renovation at NAMS. Sub-Project 6, which is surveillance cameras and access control repairs, Building 25 at NAMS. Sub-Project 8, which is replace kitchen flooring and finishes, Building 26 at NAMS. Sub-Project 11, which is interior lighting upgrade at Lakes Crossing. Sub-Project 12, which is Building 8 exiting upgrade at NAMS. Sub-Project 14, which is a ceiling replacement in classroom infirmary building, which is actually at Nevada Youth Training Center in Elko. And Sub-Project 16, which is electric and HVAC upgrade Building 22 at NAMS.
Thank you for that list. Members, any questions? Senator Nguyen?
Thank you. You had mentioned some of those projects at Lakes and Stein, I believe. And I know that we also have a proposal in here with the new forensic hospital that would ultimately take over those things. How many of those projects are necessary to get us through the next 2 years while we're potentially constructing that new forensic hospital that will replace both of those, I guess, projects? It seems kind of strange to invest money in renovation projects for a building that we're ultimately going to move out of.
Yeah, Brian Walker for the record. I know the one project on here, Lakes Crossing, that's an interior lighting upgrade, and so that's something is probably more of an energy efficiency type project, and so I think that's why it's something that could be deferred. I know if you're talking about the Stein facility down south, that we're currently doing a project right now, and in the future we will move out of that building after the forensic facility is opened. I know short term we do need those beds, and we do have to make those upgrades now to keep the facility open, to keep it fully licensed and compliant for those that are housed there, even though long term it will go away.
Are there any other projects included in that, like bunch of things that are necessary to maintain the facilities and to be in compliance and have those forensic beds that obviously we're so desperately in need of currently?
Brian Walker for the record. No, they are not. These are projects at different DHHS facilities.
Thank you. Members, in the course of this conversation, I'm sure you had an opportunity to look over the CIP document that was handed to you. Those were the only items that I had that I wanted further discussion on. Were there any other items that members wanted to have more of a discussion on? All right, not seeing any. Well, I know that we are trying to save as much as we can because there's so many things in the unknown that we don't know what's going to happen. However, when I look at the deferred projects, I'd like to approve everything that's on it with the exception of C, 25C05, which is the Hobart Dam. I truly believe we need to go ahead and do the bonding for that. I understand that that might be a project we don't start until 2026 and hope to have it finished before we get back here, but if not, it won't be the first time that we've asked for an extension on a CIP project. And going down to 25C27, after hearing the conversation about that state building purchase, approval of the $2 million of the $4 million that was removed, adding back in the $2 million for that project. And then on the 25M02, the $10 million savings that was there, while it will be great to save money, we also want to stay in compliance because lawsuits cost us so much more than that $10 million would. And then finally, on 25M23, the Key Pittman water intrusive repairs, and it was recommended that the $294,184 project be deferred. I'd like to go ahead and move forward with that, and I'd accept a motion to for this as read by staff with the amendments that I just stated. Are there any questions?
Okay, I'm going to see if I get this right, Madam Chair.
Members, are there any questions on what I've just stated? Assemblymember Haven.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure with the changes that we're proposing that this would bring us within our bond affordability.
That is my understanding, but staff can confirm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, I believe that through our conversations with the state treasurer that there was additional bond affordability beyond what was in the executive budget, and those additions are would still put us within that limit.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just a statement, if I may, Madam Chair.
Of course.
I just want to say thank you to staff, yourself, everybody that was involved in working on this to make the changes so we could be within the bonding affordability. I know a lot of work went into it. That's why we're here at almost 8 o'clock at night. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody that worked on this.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the subcommittee report inclusive of the 8 projects in attachment F with the funding change from general fund to bonding, plus to not approve projects C14, C22, C23, C29, P02, P04, P07, P09, M11, M19, M27, S04, S07, and finally add 2 million back to C26.
We're going to get a clarification on that motion.
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, SO4 would be a $500,000 reduction, and SO7 would be a $2 million reduction.
Yes, if you could restate that.
Thank you very much. I would move to approve the subcommittee report inclusive of the 8 projects in attachment F with funding changes, with the funding change from general fund to bonding, plus to not approve projects C14, C22, C23, C29, P02, P04, P07, P09, M11, M19, M27, and S04 is a $500,000 reduction. S07 is a $2 million reduction. And finally, add $2 million back to C26.
Did I write that right?
C27, I apologize.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience with me as we walk through everything. I truly appreciate it. Members, that brings us to the end of our agenda, which is public comment. Again, if you'd like to call in for public comment, our number is 888-475-4499. The meeting ID is 88249582-105. Then please press pound. If you'd like to make public comment here in Carson City, I invite you to the table. If you're in Las Vegas, I invite you to the table there, and then we will go to our phone lines. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City, we'll go to Las Vegas, where there's a few people coming to the table. And as soon as you're seated, you can start. Make sure you turn on your mic, state your name for the record, and spell your name for the record. You have two minutes each, and You guys can decide who goes first.
I'll go. Thank you, committee. It's nice to see the kind of scrutiny that the committee has over $300,000 for certain projects, and I really hope that you put the type of scrutiny on the forensics facility. I'm just here to say that we greatly oppose this until we do the proper due diligence and the research that you would ask me as a private investor for a commercial development of this size. If I wanted to build a casino at this parcel of land, you would ask me to do an urban development impact study to determine how the community members will be impacted by the construction in this new giant facility here. You would ask me to conduct a study to measure the traffic impact with a facility of this many beds and residents and new employees, how that's going to inflect two major arteries going into Las Vegas. You would ask me to do an environmental impact study. And these are the things that this project is not doing simply because the state currently owns the land and you're grandfathered in. But we have these processes in place to protect the community members and to ensure that the development or any potential development is going to do right by and be good shepherds of that land for the taxpayers in it. And we are asking that you simply do those things before you approve the funding for an over $300 million project, and you give it the same type of due diligence that you just did for a mere $300 to fix potential mold in a ranger's home. And so transparency has been lacking in this. Even the name of this project, Forensics Facility, it's a psychiatric ward for the criminally insane that has a criminal record. Why are we hiding it in a marketing name to zhuzh it up and to minimize the public's awareness of this project? So again, please do the full due diligence and come back to us and say.
Thank you so much. You're at your 2 minutes. And could you do me a favor? You did not state your name at the beginning. Could you please state your name?
My name is Matthew Wombolt.
Thank you.
My name is Matthew Wombolt.
Thank you so much. You can go ahead. And remember, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Root. I'm the organizer of the opposition for this, one of the organizers for the opposition for this forensics facility. I want to start by just telling you that this only came to our attention just a couple of weeks ago. We already have online at change.org over 500 signatures against this, and then I have another 300 signatures just in the last 2 weeks. The community is not for this. There's been, as Matthew was saying, no transparency and no community involvement. Details are so short on what this is going to look like, but one thing we know for sure is it is dramatically going to change the landscape of our community. And I think it needs some due diligence before we do that. Not only environmentally, but traffic study as well. This project is likely to cause tremendous traffic issues during and after the construction. We need an independent traffic study on what that's going to look like. Environmentally, there's also a waterway that goes through this property. Is that water going to be diverted? Is it going to be blocked? What is the environmental impact? And are there any federal issues with the EPA on that? I've been told that there is some lead and asbestos on that property. So how is that going to affect things downstream? There are safety issues. Within 1 mile, there are 15 schools, preschools, grade schools, high school, and CSN, 12 churches. Economic impact. There's corridors of businesses right around this. Why is there not a cost-benefit analysis of other potential sites? In closing, this location is just not a good fit for our community, and there's got to be better places that it could be built. It's right in the middle of a residential area of established homes for the last 40 years. It's premature to approve the funding on this project. I ask that you remove this funding for the facility in order to do some independent studies on the things I mentioned. And in closing, there are so many unanswered questions. If we don't get answers on all of these things, I think we as a community will have no choice but to take legal action to stop this facility from moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
Yes, I'm Tom Dudas, and residents in the Lewis Homes community that is adjacent to this property, and had been party to gathering many of these signatures. And in talking to the neighbors, what they reacted most to was the forensic facility to be increased in its size. The concentration in this area of this type of facility as well as the addition of what is the Hope housing, just creates a concentration that maybe this be recalled as a concentration camp. We're not in favor of it. The money could certainly be spent more economically, as it is proving to be in the neighborhood of $1,000 a square foot. And that there's other properties. I might recommend the Grant Sawyer building, your 123 East Washington property is sitting there idle. And for a forensic facility, that's not unreasonable to reconfigure it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us here tonight in your comments. Not seeing anyone else in Las Vegas broadcast. Do we have anyone joining us on the phone line?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hello.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Hi, this is John Rando, R-A-N-D-O, and I am here to very much oppose any funding for the forensics facility and the expansion for the following reasons. As a state and a community, we can't afford the project right now. With the projected budget deficit of $190 million, and it will probably be more, this is a project that will have to wait until our finances are in better order. The other parts I don't like, this facility has 14 schools and 1,400 businesses in the immediate area. Not to mention, it is in a heavy residential area that surrounds this proposed facility. This project, as you can see, will impact public safety, not to mention traffic, in a very negative direction. Also, escapes from this facility are a very real concern, and more than just a possibility. There has never been a prison that has not had an escape. This facility needs a more secure location away from businesses, schools, and residential neighborhoods that are as close as these will be to this proposed project. Will the shutdown facility in the north part of Nevada be better served by updating and adding buildings and spaces and beds, rather than being turned into another campus of hope that is an experimental idea for our state? Please remove this project from the budget until an independent study can be completed. Show there is no negative impact on the surrounding community and can be properly funded in our Nevada state budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller ending in 921, please press *6 to unmute yourself and begin when ready.
Hello, yes, Denise Reitz in Las Vegas, born and raised for 61 years, grew up in this area. I oppose this funding for the forensic facility in our quiet neighborhood that we have lived all of our lives. We have, as has been stated, so many schools where children walk to and from school. We have churches and parks where we gather to pray and play. We have well-established neighborhoods on all sides of CSN where the forensics buildings is slated to be built. Are you aware that this facility will hold convicted criminal and mentally unstable people? Basically, you're putting a prison in the middle of town. This area has already had its fair share of public services in our community, the Opportunity Village, Ross and Neal Psychiatric Hospital, and, of course, the adult mental health services. There hasn't been any communication with the surrounding businesses and neighborhoods regarding this facility. Everyone we talk to, they are unaware of this. It's like you are hiding something. I don't know why. What about, as has been stated, the traffic studies? As Marilyn Dondero Loop, the chairwoman, has said, if we save this money and we don't fund this actual proposal, we can help with the ranger housing, the dam improvements, the bridge replacement. That will help all of the area up in Reno, in the northern area. Please halt the funding of this project Please do proper diligence and cancel the proposal and not fund it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
If you've recently joined us and would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to join the queue.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to the members. My name is Nancy Ingleton, and I'm in Ward 1 and wanted to say I very much oppose any funding for the forensics facility for the following reasons. Number one, there's been a complete disregard for the neighborhood areas to be most impacted by this project. The area is heavily residential. This facility and the homeless facility with it, with a combined 500,000 square feet, cannot help but alarmingly affect the neighborhood's quality of life and property values. How is this fair to these longtime residential voters and taxpayers? Number two, if, God forbid, an inmate escapes, what safety and security measures would be in place to return the inmate to the facility? Which law enforcement agency, if any, would have jurisdiction? There are 14 schools within a mile of this facility, with many students on foot to and from class. These neighborhoods fear for their children and their grandchildren's safety. Would you want your kids to walk this area? Have you even looked at this area? There has been no previous public discussion on this facility. Where is the official environmental impact study, the economic impact study, and the official traffic studies for review? Jones, Charleston, and Oakey are already very busy through streets. Both this facility and the homeless facility with 1,200 occupants and estimated 1,000 employees, not to mention guests, cannot help but dramatically add to urban and traffic congestion. This project is being shoved down our throats, and our taxes will surely be raised in order to future maintain it. Please remove this project from the budget until an independent study can be completed and show that there's no negative impact on the surrounding community. I cannot believe that committee members wouldn't understand that this location for such huge projects in a heavily residential area is, at minimum, an ill-conceived abuse of resources, and do not have the vision to create more viable solutions to these issues, such as utilizing, expanding, and allocating funds to already existing outlets with the experience and services in place for these types of clients. Thank you, committee members, for your time and attention to this very important matter.
Thank you so much for calling in. Broadcast, do we have any other callers?
Chair, there are no additional callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. So members, this is our last budget closing. We'll miss each other. We won't be getting together like this for a while, but our individual committee meetings will start full speed. To all of our staff, the entire fiscal staff, you guys are amazing. I'm not sure how you put in all the hours to do all the work with all the changes that come from this committee. Thank you for the long hours, those early mornings, late nights, and to the committee, thank you for the work that you all have put in to get us here. We only have a few more days. We can do this, and we're going to close this with a balanced budget that is reflective of who we are as Nevadans and our priorities to our constituents. So thank you all. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.